Elena Varga stood at the window of her small cabin and watched the stars move past like slow rivers of light. She had been traveling for 3 months now, 3 months alone in a ship that was not much bigger than her apartment back on Earth. 3 months of silence, of waiting, of preparing for something no human had ever done before. She was going to speak for all of humanity. The message had arrived 8 months ago. It came from deep space, from a place so far away that the light from its stars had not yet reached Earth when the first humans learned to make fire. The message was simple. It said that humanity had been noticed. It said that the Galactic Concord, a council of 12 ancient species that ruled half the galaxy, wanted to meet the newcomers. It said that Earth should send one representative. Elena was chosen because she had spent 30 years as a diplomat. She had ended wars. She had brought enemies together. She had sat across tables from the most difficult leaders on Earth and found ways to make them agree. But this was different. This was not about two countries or two cultures. This was about proving that her entire species deserved to exist among the stars. The ship's computer made a soft sound. They were approaching the station. Elena moved to the front of the cabin and looked through the main window. What she saw made her breath stop in her chest. The celestial atrium was not a space station. It was a world. It hung in the darkness like a metal moon, covered in towers and lights and structures that her mind could not fully understand. Ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Thousands of ships, maybe millions, each one carrying beings from worlds she had never heard of. Species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. She was a single woman in a single ship. She had come to knock on the door of gods. The docking process took 2 hours. Her ship was scanned 17 times. She was asked to confirm her identity through voice, blood, and something the computer called a soul signature, which she did not understand but agreed to anyway. Finally, a docking tube connected to her ship, and a door opened. Elena expected many things. She expected guards, perhaps, or a welcome party, or at least someone to tell her where to go. Instead, she found a small cleaning robot. It was about the size of a dog, with 4 spinning brushes and a single blinking light that might have been an eye. It looked at her, made a beeping sound, and rolled away down the corridor. She waited for 5 minutes. No one came. Elena picked up her bag and followed the robot. The corridors of the celestial atrium were enormous. The ceilings were so high that she could not see them. The walls were made of something that looked like metal, but felt warm when she touched it. Strange symbols glowed on the floor, and she guessed they were directions, but she could not read them. She walked for nearly an hour before she found anyone who would speak to her. It was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. It wore a uniform of some kind and held a device that projected words into the air. "Human?" it asked. Its voice was flat, without emotion. "Yes," Elena said. "I am Ambassador Elena Varga from Earth. I am here for the council evaluation." The creature looked at its device. It made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. Elena could not tell. "You are late," it said. "Your quarters are in section 47. Follow the yellow line." "Thank you," Elena said. "Can you tell me when the council will see me?" The creature was already walking away. "When they decide you are worth seeing," it called back. Elena looked down at the floor. There were many colored lines running in different directions. She found the yellow one and began to follow it. Section 47 was in the lower part of the station. The corridors here were smaller and darker. The walls were plain gray metal with no decorations. The air smelled strange, like old water and something chemical. Elena passed doors with symbols she did not recognize. Behind some of them, she heard sounds, clicking, humming, once something that sounded like screaming, but far away. Her room was at the end of a long hallway. The door opened when she touched it, and she stepped inside. The room was small. There was a bed that was too short for her, a table with no chair, and a window that looked out at a wall. The lights were dim and yellow. On the table, there was a small screen with words in her language. "Welcome, pre-sentient observation subject. Please remain in your quarters until summoned. Food and water will be provided at standard intervals. Do not attempt to leave section 47. Violators will be removed." Elena read the message 3 times. Pre-sentient. They did not even consider humans to be fully intelligent. They had put her in a cage for animals they wanted to study. She sat down on the bed that was too short. She put her head in her hands. For a moment, just one moment, she allowed herself to feel small. She allowed herself to feel afraid. She allowed herself to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake by coming here. Then she stood up. She walked to the window and looked at the gray wall outside. She thought about her father, who had worked in a factory for 40 years so that she could go to school. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war and raised 6 children alone. She thought about every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. They had not sent her here to be afraid. They had not sent her here to be small. They had sent her here because she was Elena Varga, and she did not give up. She opened her bag and took out her files. She had 3 months of research. She knew everything that was public about the council races. She knew their histories, their cultures, their strengths, and their weaknesses. She had come prepared. The Galactic Concord thought humanity was a young and stupid species. They thought humans were violent children who had barely learned to walk. They looked at Earth and saw only mistakes. But Elena knew something they did not. She knew that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or power. It was something much simpler. Humans never stopped fighting, even when they were afraid, even when they were alone, even when the whole universe looked down at them and said they were nothing. She smiled at her reflection in the dark window. Let them underestimate her. Let them put her in a cage. Let them think she was nothing but a curious animal from a small planet. When the council finally called for her, she would show them what humanity really was, and they would never forget it. The summons came on the 4th day. Elena had spent those 4 days alone in her small room. Food arrived twice a day through a slot in the wall. It was gray and tasteless, but it kept her alive. She used the time to review her notes, to practice her speeches, and to prepare herself for what was coming. When the door finally opened, 2 guards stood outside. They were Vrethkai, one of the oldest species in the Concord. They looked like insects, but they were as tall as Elena and covered in hard black shells that shined under the lights. Their eyes were large and dark, and their mouths were full of small, sharp teeth. They did not speak to her. They simply turned and began walking, expecting her to follow. The journey to the council chamber took almost an hour. They walked through corridors that grew wider and more beautiful as they went higher in the station. The walls changed from gray metal to white stone. The floors became covered in soft carpets woven with patterns of gold and silver. The air grew warm and smelled of flowers that Elena did not recognize. Finally, they reached a door that was 3 times her height. It was made of something that looked like crystal, and light moved inside it like trapped lightning. The guards stepped aside, and the door opened on its own. Elena walked through. The council chamber was the most beautiful and terrifying place she had ever seen. It was shaped like a half circle, with the curved wall rising up and up until it disappeared into a ceiling of pure light. 12 enormous thrones sat along the curve, each one different, each one built for a different kind of body. In front of the thrones, at the lowest point of the room, there was a small raised platform. It was barely big enough for one person to stand on. The petitioner's circle. Elena walked to it. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. The galleries above were filled with delegates from countless species. They sat in rows that climbed toward the light, whispering to each other, pointing at her, studying her like she was an animal in a cage. She stepped onto the platform and stood straight. She looked at the 12 thrones. 11 of them were filled. There were the Vrethkai, with their insect bodies and golden decorations. There were the Sonara, beings made of living crystal that sang when they moved. There were creatures that looked like floating clouds of gas, others that seemed to be made of metal and wire, and some that Elena could not describe at all. In the largest throne, a massive, slug-like being sat in a pool of dark water. These were the dwellers of the deep, the oldest species in the Concord. They had not spoken in 3 council meetings. Some said they only spoke when history was about to change. The 12th throne was empty. It was smaller than the others, and it was placed at the very end of the curve, almost out of sight. It was the throne meant for new species, the throne that humanity was supposed to earn. A Vrethkai in the center throne raised one of its clawed hands. The whispers stopped. The chamber became silent. I am High Arbiter Kethvolan, the creature said. Its voice was sharp and cold, like metal scraping against metal. You stand before the Galactic Concord to answer for your species. Do you understand? I understand, Elena said. Her voice was calm. Kethvolan made a clicking sound. Then let us begin. For the next 2 hours, Elena stood on that small platform and listened to the council tell her everything that was wrong with humanity. Kethvolan spoke first. He talked about human history. He talked about wars and violence. He talked about how humans had killed millions of their own kind for land, for money, for ideas. He showed images on the great crystal walls, images of bombs falling on cities, images of soldiers marching, images of bodies in fields. You discovered the power of the atom, Kethvolan said, and your first thought was to build a weapon. You dropped that weapon on your own people, on children, on families. You burned entire cities to ash and called it victory. The chamber made sounds of disgust, clicking, hissing, humming. Elena heard them all. She did not move. The Sonoran delegate spoke next. Her voice was beautiful, like music made of glass. But her words were not beautiful at all. The humans have not even unified their own planet, she said. They still fight over resources while standing on a world of plenty. They destroy their own environment. They poison their own air and water. They are like children who set fire to their own home and then cry when it burns. More sounds of agreement from the galleries. A delegate made of swirling purple gas spoke about human cruelty. A creature with 16 eyes spoke about human ignorance. A being that looked like a tree spoke about human greed. One by one, they listed every failure, every mistake, every dark moment in human history. They did not mention the art. They did not mention the music. They did not mention the times when humans had helped each other, saved each other, loved each other. They only saw the darkness. Finally, Kethvolan raised his hand again. The Galactic Concord has heard enough, he said. We have made our decision. He pressed something on his throne, and words appeared in the air above Elena's head. Words in every language of the Concord. Words that every delegate could read. Humanity is granted provisional observation status. They are forbidden from leaving their star system. They are forbidden from contacting other species. They will remain under observation for 5,000 standard years. After that time, if they have demonstrated sufficient growth, their status will be reviewed. The chamber exploded with sounds. Some were cheering, some were laughing. Elena heard a delegate somewhere above her make a joke about keeping animals in cages. 5,000 years. Humanity would be locked in its own solar system for longer than recorded history, for longer than any empire had ever lasted. They would be prisoners in their own home. Kethvolan looked down at her. His dark eyes showed something that might have been amusement. Does the human wish to speak before we close these proceedings? Elena looked at him. She looked at the other council members. She looked at the hundreds of delegates in the galleries above, all of them waiting to see if the primitive creature from Earth would cry, or beg, or simply accept its punishment. She raised one finger, not in anger, not in threat. She simply raised it, slowly and calmly, and held it in the air. The gesture meant weight in almost every human culture. It was simple, it was quiet, it was nothing that should have mattered. But something about it, something about the absolute calm in her eyes, made the entire chamber fall silent. Even Kethvolan stopped. He stared at that single raised finger like it was a weapon pointed at his heart. Elena held the silence for 10 long seconds. She let them feel it. She let them wonder. Then she lowered her hand and smiled. Yes, she said, I wish to speak. And the council, for the first time in 1,000 years, had no idea what was about to happen. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal device. It was no bigger than her thumb. The guards at the edge of the chamber moved forward, but she held up her hand. It is not a weapon, she said. It is a projector. I wish to show the council some information. Kethvolan made an angry clicking sound. You did not ask permission to bring technology into this chamber. This is against protocol. I was not told the protocol, Elena said calmly. I was kept in a room meant for animals and given no instructions. So I brought what I needed. She pressed a button on the device before anyone could stop her. Light shot up from her hand, and spread across the great crystal walls of the chamber. Numbers appeared, dates, images, text in the language of every species present. "You have judged humanity by our worst moments," Elena said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of that massive room. "You have shown our wars, our weapons, our mistakes, and you are right, we have done terrible things." She paused. The chamber was completely silent now. Every eye, every sensor, every form of attention was fixed on her. "But you have forgotten something important," she continued. "You have forgotten that every species in this room once did the same, and many of you did far worse." She pointed at the walls and the images changed. "The Vrethkai," she said, looking directly at Kethvalan, "your species is very proud. You call yourselves the keepers of order. But 4,000 years ago, you were not keepers of anything except death." The walls showed images that made even the alien delegates gasp. Massive swarms of Vrethkai ships descending on peaceful worlds, cities burning under waves of fire, bodies piled in mountains. "The Vrethkai genocide swarms," Elena said. 17 star systems destroyed. 4 billion lives ended. You did not kill them because they threatened you. You killed them because they had resources you wanted, because they were different from you, because you could. Kethvolan's mandibles opened and closed, but no sound came out. Elena turned to the Sonaran delegate, the beautiful crystal being whose voice was like music. "The Sonara," Elena said. "Your people are known for harmony. You speak of balance and peace, but your history tells a different story." New images appeared. Crystal beings fighting each other with weapons of pure sound. Moons cracking apart like eggs. Entire populations dying as their bodies shattered from vibrations they could not escape. "The harmonic wars," Elena said. "Your species could not agree on a philosophy, not a territory, not a resource, just an idea. So you fought. You killed millions of your own kind over nothing but thoughts. You destroyed 3 of your own moons and left the pieces floating in space as a warning to anyone who disagreed with the winners." The Sonoran delegate's light flickered. She made no response. Elena looked at each throne in turn, and for each one, she had a story. The cloud beings had once poisoned the atmospheres of 12 planets to eliminate competition for gas-based resources. The metal creatures had created artificial diseases that wiped out organic species they considered inferior. The tree-like beings had burned entire forests of their own kind when different colonies developed different beliefs. And then Elena looked at the largest throne, at the massive slug-like creature sitting in its pool of dark water, the dweller of the deep. "Your species is the oldest," Elena said. "You have been here since before the others learned to build fires. The Concord treats you with great respect. They ask for your wisdom." She paused. The dweller did not move. Its many eyes watched her without blinking. "But wisdom came late to your people," Elena continued. "For 600 generations, your ancestors ate their young. Not because they were hungry, because it was tradition, because it was how power was shown. The strong consumed the weak, and the weak were often children who had done nothing wrong." A sound like grinding rocks came from the dweller's throne. It might have been anger. It might have been something else. Elena turned back to face the entire chamber. "I found all of this information in your own archives," she said. "It is not secret. It is not hidden. It is simply forgotten. You have decided that your dark past does not define you. You have decided that you grew, that you changed, that you became better." She lowered her projector. The images on the walls faded away. "But you will not give humanity the same chance." The silence in the chamber was so deep that Elena could hear her own heart beating. "Humanity split the atom 79 years ago," she said. 79 years. That is nothing. That is a single breath in the life of your Concord. And yes, we built weapons. Yes, we killed. But we also stopped. We looked at what we had done, and we felt horror. We created laws to prevent it from happening again. We taught our children about the danger so they would never forget." She looked at Kethvalan. "How long did it take the Vrethkai to stop their genocide swarms? 2,000 years? 3? Kethvalan said nothing. Elena looked at the Sonoran delegate. How long did the harmonic wars last before your people learned to disagree without killing? Longer than human civilization has existed? The crystal being remained dark and silent. Elena spread her hands. You look at humanity and see children. Dangerous children who cannot be trusted. But children grow. Children learn. And we are learning faster than any species in your records. She pulled up one more image. A simple timeline. It showed human history from the first tools to the first spacecraft. The line was so short, so thin, that it was almost invisible compared to the timelines of the other species. You took millions of years to reach the stars, Elena said. We took 10,000. You needed ages to develop technology that we created in generations. You call us primitive, but we are not slow. We are not weak. She let the timeline fade. We are simply young, and you are afraid of what we will become. The dweller of the deep shifted in its pool. Its many eyes focused on Elena with an intensity that made her skin cold. But she did not look away. She had spent her life facing difficult beings across tables and in meeting rooms. This was no different. She had shown them the truth. She had held up a mirror to their past and forced them to see it. Now it was time to tell them what came next. And Elena Varga was only getting started. Elena looked down at the small platform beneath her feet, the petitioner's circle. For thousands of years, every species that wanted to join the conquered had stood on this spot. They had waited to be judged. They had accepted whatever decision was made. They had followed the rules. Elena stepped off the platform. The reaction was immediate. Gasps filled the chamber. The Vrethkai guards moved forward with their weapons raised. Delegates in the gallery stood up in shock. Someone shouted something in a language Elena did not understand, but she did not stop. She walked forward toward the 12 thrones, her boots making soft sounds on the ancient stone floor. She cannot do this, Kethvolan shouted, rising from his throne. No petitioner has ever left the circle unbidden. This is a violation of sacred protocol. Guards, remove her immediately. The guards rushed toward Elena. They were fast, much faster than humans. Their clawed hands reached for her arms. Stop! The word was like an earthquake. It came from the pool of dark water where the dweller of the deep sat. The ancient creature had spoken for the first time in 3 council meetings. Its voice was so deep, so powerful, that Elena felt it in her bones more than she heard it with her ears. The guards froze. Everyone froze. The dweller's many eyes moved slowly until they were all looking at Kethvolan. Let the human finish, it said. We would hear what she has to say. Kethvolan's mandibles clicked in frustration, but he sat back down. He did not argue with the dweller. No one argued with the dweller. Elena nodded slightly toward the ancient being. Then she turned to face the entire chamber. You see a young species standing before you, she said. You see a people who have been among the stars for less than a century, and you think that makes us weak. You think that makes us inferior. She walked slowly along the curve of thrones, looking at each council member in turn. But you are wrong. Our youth is not our weakness. Our youth is our greatest strength. She activated her projector again. A new image appeared on the walls. It showed Earth as it was 10,000 years ago. A blue marble covered in ice and forests, with small groups of humans living in caves and hunting with stone tools. This is what we were, Elena said. 10,000 years ago we had nothing. No metal, no writing, no cities. We were animals trying to survive in a world that wanted to kill us. The image changed. It showed the same planet, but now covered in lights. Cities spreading across continents, ships launching into space, satellites orbiting like a second ring. This is what we are now. In 10,000 years, we went from caves to stars. We built civilizations, destroyed them, and built them again. We invented mathematics, science, medicine, art. We learned to fly, to communicate across oceans, to split atoms, to touch other worlds. She looked at Kethvolan. How long did the Vrethkai take to go from stone tools to space travel? Your records say 4 million years. She looked at the Sonoran delegate. The Sonara took 2 million years, and your species was considered remarkably fast. She spread her arms wide. We took 10,000, not because we are lucky, not because we had help, because we are hungry, because we never stop, Because every human who has ever lived has looked at the world and asked, how can I make this better? How can I go further? What is beyond that mountain, that ocean, that sky? She stopped walking. She stood in the center of the chamber, equal distance from all the thrones. You see our wars and you think we are violent, but our wars made us strong. They made us adapt. They pushed us to create new technologies, new strategies, new ways of thinking. Every conflict in human history, no matter how terrible, left us better prepared for the next challenge. Her voice grew stronger. You see our short lifespans and you think we are fragile, but our short lives make us urgent. We do not have time to wait for change. We make change happen. A human can have an idea in the morning and start building it before sunset. We do not spend centuries debating. We act. She pointed at the empty throne at the end of the curve. You have offered us that seat in 5,000 years. You have told us to wait, to be patient, to prove ourselves over time, but you do not understand what 5,000 years means to us. She pulled up a new image. It showed human progress as a line rising sharply upward. In 5,000 years, if you leave us alone, we will have technologies you cannot imagine. We will have spread to every corner of our solar system. We will have changed ourselves in ways that will make us unrecognizable. You think you are giving us time to mature, but you are giving us time to surpass you. The chamber was silent. The delegates in the galleries were no longer whispering. The council members were no longer looking at her with amusement or contempt. She saw something else in their eyes now. Fear. I did not come here to beg for your permission, Elena said. I did not come here to ask you to accept us. I came here to warn you. She raised her hand again, but this time she did not raise one finger. She pointed directly at the High Arbiter, her arms steady, her eyes locked on his. Humanity will not wait 5,000 years. We are not patient, we are not slow, and we do not accept limits that others try to place on us. Kethvolen leaned forward in his throne. His dark eyes were narrow with anger. Is that a threat? He asked. You stand in our chamber, break our laws, and now you threaten us? Elena shook her head slowly. It is not a threat. It is a simple truth. You can choose to see us as enemies, or you can choose to see us as partners. You can lock us in our solar system and watch us grow stronger behind that wall, or you can welcome us now and help shape what we become. She lowered her arm. The choice is yours, but I want you to understand something very clearly. She looked at every member of the council, one by one. Whatever you decide, it will not stop us. Nothing stops us. That is what it means to be human. The dweller of the deep made a sound. It was low and rumbling, like stones moving deep underground. Elena could not tell if it was approval or anger, but she was not finished yet. She still had one more thing to say, the most important thing. The words that would change everything, and she would make sure they never forgot them. Elena took a deep breath. The chamber was completely silent. Every being in that vast room was watching her, waiting to see what the strange creature from the small blue planet would do next. She thought about everyone back home who was counting on her. Scientists who had spent their lives dreaming of the stars. Children who drew pictures of alien worlds. Her own daughter who had cried when Elena left because she did not know if her mother would ever come back. This moment was for all of them. You have given humanity a sentence, Elena said. 5,000 years of isolation. 5,000 years trapped in our own solar system while you watch us from a distance and decide if we are worthy. She shook her head slowly. We do not accept your sentence. Kethvolen made a sharp clicking sound. You do not have a choice. The Concord has decided. Our decision is final. Elena smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not. Your decision is based on fear, she said. You are afraid of what humanity might become, and you should be, but not for the reasons you think. She walked toward the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. In 50 years, humanity will return to this chamber. The words hung in the air like smoke. 50 years? The Sonoran delegate's voice chimed with disbelief. That is impossible. You cannot develop the technology to challenge the Concord in 50 years. It took us I know how long it took you, Elena interrupted. I have read your histories. I know your timelines, and I am telling you that they do not apply to us. She pointed at the empty throne at the end of the curve. In 50 years, a human will sit in that chair, not as a petitioner, not as an observation subject, as an equal member of this council. Laughter erupted from some of the galleries. A delegate with too many eyes made a sound that could only be mockery. Even some of the council members seemed amused. But Elena noticed that Kethvalon was not laughing. Neither was the Dweller of the Deep. "You think this is a joke," Elena said. "You think I am a foolish child making promises I cannot keep. But let me tell you what humanity has done in the last 50 years. She pulled up a final set of images. Human achievements, compressed into a timeline so short it was almost invisible by galactic standards. 50 years ago, we had never left our own atmosphere. Now we have walked on our moon and sent machines to the edges of our solar system. 50 years ago, we communicated with wires and paper. Now we send voices and images around our world in less than a second. 50 years ago, diseases that had killed millions for centuries were unstoppable. Now they are gone forever. The images changed to show human scientists, artists, builders, people working, creating, dreaming. We did all of this while fighting each other. We did all of this while struggling with our own worst impulses. Imagine what we will do when we have a common goal. Imagine what we will become when we are reaching for the stars together." She let the images fade and looked directly at the High Arbiter. 50 years. That is my promise, not a threat, not a hope. A promise. When humans make promises, we keep them. Keith Volan stood from his throne. His carapace was shaking with what might have been anger or fear. "And if we try to stop you," he asked, "if we enforce the quarantine, if we send ships to keep you trapped in your system?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Then we will come anyway. We will find a way. We will build ships you have never imagined, weapons you have never seen, technologies that will make your ancient science look like children's toys. And when we arrive, we will not be asking for a seat at your table." She paused. "We will be building our own table, and you will be asking for seats at ours." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were shouting in 100 languages. Some were demanding that the guards arrest her. Others were arguing with each other. The Sonoran delegate was making a sound like breaking glass. But Elena was not finished. She turned her back on the council. It was the greatest insult possible, a complete rejection of their authority, a statement that she no longer considered them worth facing. She began walking toward the great crystal doors. 50 years, arbiters," she called over her shoulder. "I suggest you spend them wisely. Learn about us. Watch our broadcasts. Study our art and science and history. Because when we return, we will expect you to understand what you are dealing with." She reached the doors. They opened before her, as if even the ancient station itself recognized that she was no longer a petitioner. She stopped at the threshold and turned back one final time. "We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We have clawed our way from darkness into light over and over again. Every time we fall, we rise stronger. Every time we fail, we learn. Every time someone tells us we cannot do something, we prove them wrong." Her voice filled the entire chamber. "You called us children. You forgot that children grow up. And when we do, we will remember how we were treated. We will remember every insult, every dismissal, every moment you looked down on us." She smiled one last time. "I hope you will give us good memories to replace those. But if not, we will come anyway. Because that is what humans do." She walked through the doors and they sealed behind her. For a long moment the chamber was silent. The council members looked at each other. The delegates in the galleries sat in stunned confusion. Then a sound began in the upper levels, a soft, rhythmic noise. It took Elena a moment to recognize it. Applause. Someone was clapping. Then another being joined in. Then another. The sound spread through the galleries like a wave. Not everyone was clapping. Many species did not even have hands, but they were making sounds of approval, of respect, of something that might have been hope. A junior delegate from a small, unimportant species near the back of the chamber stood up. She was young by galactic standards, barely 1,000 years old. Her species had been members of the Concord for only 10,000 years. They still remembered what it was like to be judged. She raised her appendage, the closest thing her species had to a hand, and she clapped. Others joined her. Keth Volan watched the spreading applause with something cold in his eyes. He did not clap. Neither did most of the council members. But the Dweller of the Deep made a sound that might have been laughter. Interesting, the ancient creature rumbled. Very interesting. High Arbiter Keth Volan turned to the other council members. This changes nothing, he said. The decision stands. The humans will be quarantined. But even as he said the words, he knew they were hollow. Something had shifted in that chamber. Something had changed. A single human woman had walked into the heart of galactic power and told them they should be afraid. And the worst part, the part that would keep Keth Volan awake for many nights to come, was that he believed her. Somewhere in the docking bay, Elena Varga boarded her small ship and began the long journey home. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if her words would change anything. But as she watched the celestial atrium grow smaller in her window, she allowed herself a small smile. 50 years, that was the promise. And humanity always kept its promises. The stars were waiting, and humanity was coming for them. Whether the galaxy was ready or not,